She might be one of my favorite characters in Genshin, but my Shenhe was a mistake. She's powerful, elegant, fun to play, and has a tragic backstory followed up by growth, which made me love her as a character, but I never meant to pull for her. Let's talk about what happened on her debut banner, what came afterwards, and why she was worth a little heartbreak in the end. I first heard of Shenhe in December 2020 when Hoya dropped her teaser trailer. She looked like an interesting, introspective character with some trauma in her past and an air of melancholy about her. Her trailer hinted that she had almost crossed paths with the Traveler and Paimon already, and I was curious to meet her and experience her story. We were approaching the end of version 2.3, which had focused on Inazuma, and I was looking forward to the return to Liyue and my first Lantern Rite festival. 2.4 turned out to be a brilliant update, with entertaining events, tons of rewards, and the release of the haunting new region called Enkonomiya. At the time, the only money I'd spent on Genshin was the monthly Welkin Moon and the basic version of the Battle Pass, so I had to be careful who to pull for. I had spent a lot of my free early game wishes on previous banners. I didn't get Raiden, lost my 50-50 on Kokomi's banner, got Hu Tao trying to wish for Toma, and had recently used my guarantee to get Albedo. I had enough saved to get one new character in the first half of 2.4 patch, and I had my heart set on Zhao, who had a personality and a playstyle I enjoyed a ton during his story quest. When the update dropped, I pulled a few times on Zhao's banner and lost my 50-50 to Jean. I was ecstatic. She was the one standard 5-star I really wanted, so it was a win really. After a few more temples, I decided to save my remaining wishes so that I could maybe wish live on stream the following day instead. I played for a little while, and then my selfish train crumbled again. I decided to do a couple more temples. The shooting star turned gold, and I was ready to celebrate my Zhao, and Shenhe appeared instead. I sat there for a moment in utter confusion, thinking, did I lose my 50-50? Wait, but it's Shenhe, how? And then it dawned on me, in my rush of excitement, I had wished on the wrong banner. What I hadn't realized is that if you closed the wishing page, it would reset to the first banner in the list when you next opened it. This is no longer the case. It now remembers which banner you had last looked at and opens that one instead. But back then that feature did not exist, and I had been too in the moment to even think to check. I was absolutely devastated. I had no Primo gems left, not much content to play through in the hopes of getting more wishes, and a track record of losing every 50-50 at well past soft pity, so I had little hope of getting Zhao. In the end, my dastardly partner sneakily logged into my account and bought Genesis crystals for me, and after another loss, I managed to get my Zhao in the end. But I now had an accidental Shenhe too, and I was riddled with guilt for being so careless. I have a very hard time spending money on things that aren't necessary, and one could argue Genshin waifus and husbandos aren't really basic necessities. Which begs the question, what happened next? At first, I didn't really have anyone who would work particularly well with her, and I was low on resources anyway. This was my phase where I was still stubbornly trying to build every one of the new characters that I wanted to play with, all at the same time, and with a backlog of over 20 characters to work on, this was a little overwhelming. I knew it would take a few months to get them all to a level where I would even start to feel happy with things, especially since now I had to add Zhao to the list too. I felt super guilty at having messed up so badly, but sadly, my Shenhe would have to wait. Despite this, one of the highlights of version 2.4 for me was the new Archon Interlude quest, which was all about Shenhe. I'll avoid potential spoilers, but her backstory is heartbreaking, her friendship with the Traveler is touching, and the conclusion is satisfying and full of hope. Shenhe herself is quiet and introverted, but with an edge of razor-sharp honesty, which made for some hilarious interactions. From a character and aesthetic perspective, I absolutely loved her and would have loved to have her on my account. However, at the time I had little need for her in-game niche. She's hyper-focused on being an enabler for the cryo element, and is incredible with a number of powerful DPS characters. My only cryo DPS at the time was Aloy, who I used more as a sub-DPS and a reaction enabler. She does provide general buffs as well, and shreds physical damage resistance, but I had Bennett as my go-to attack buffer and no physical DPS peeps, so Shenhe didn't really fit. I did pull Ganyu in the second half of the patch and started using her as my new cryo DPS, but building Shenhe remained low on my list of priorities. It wasn't until a whole 4 months later that she would come out of the shadows. Spring of 2022 was a trying time for Hoya. It was the height of another wave of COVID lockdowns, and Shanghai was going through a particularly tough time. Hoya decided to pause Genshin updates at version 2.7 until things went back to normal, and as a result, the Age of Ayaka began. While I liked Ayaka as a character, I wasn't planning to get her. She was fun in the trial, but didn't feel super compelling to me. But as time seemed to drag on, and the lockdown continued with no end in sight, my resolve began to crumble. Eventually, I caved in and I pulled for Ayaka. Her banner had been live for 5 days. The lack of content gave me the breathing space I needed to finally get around to building Shenhe 2, and she was a perfect pairing with my shiny new Ayaka. Building Shenhe was an odd mix of easy and annoying. I already had most of the materials needed for her ascensions, and the domain for her talents is a fairly quick one. The annoying part was her boss materials. She needs the Vishap Fin item from Enkonomiya, which to this day is a boss fight which I find pretty irritating. Shenhe's artifacts can be ridiculously easy to build too. To really shine as a support, she just needs as much attack as possible, plus ideally some energy recharge. While she could work well with a Noblesse set, it was easier to just give her two 2-piece attack sets, since I had loads of those left over. At first, I gave her the Favonius Lance, which made for a very strong build overall, but eventually I switched her spear out for the Skyward Spine to give her an even stronger attack stat. The team I use her most frequently in has good energy recharge overall, so those Favonius particles weren't a priority. Shenhe only really has 2 playstyles, and since one of them requires Chonyan, who is still unleveled on my account, I only really use one of them. Her skill is the main part of her kit, and while it has a lot of little details to it which make the description a bit of a mouthful, it's actually fairly simple. After you cast it, it grants you a damage boost for a certain number of cryo attacks within the next few seconds. That number is counted separately per character, so multiple cryo and animal characters can each benefit from the buff. The skill has a tap version and a hold version, which give it slightly different cooldowns and durations, and thanks to her passive, also provide an extra boost to different categories of attack. So far, I tend to find myself using the tap version of her skill more often than not. Its shorter cooldown works better with the faster rotation of the teams I use her in, and it provides an extra damage boost to the already powerful skills and burst of her teammates. Her burst is less important, but also well worth using. It causes cryo damage over time, while also reducing the physical and cryo resistance of opponents standing in its field, and with her second passive provides a 15% cryo damage bonus to characters within it. This leaves her normal attacks unused, which is a shame since they're so smooth to use. It feels like she's slow and languid, but she's actually not at all much slower than other polearm characters. The only combination where you're likely to see them is when you pair Shenhe with Chonyan, since he can infuse Shenhe's normal attacks with cryo. This allows her to benefit from her own buffs. Overall, this is a fun team to play around with, but the damage numbers aren't anything special, so it's generally just used in the overworld by people who happen to enjoy it. Instead, I use Shenhe as a key part of my Ayaka Freeze team, though I do enjoy her a lot with both Ganyu and Aloy, and she would work great with Kaya as well. Once I had Shenhe built, she instantly became a core member of one of my most powerful teams. Shenhe's playstyle is elegant and smooth with beautiful animations, and she provides a massive damage boost to the team's cryo damage. Since she takes up little field time, she slots in very easily into a team's rotation, and the different versions of her skill let you tailor her usage to whatever your team's focus is. While it's fair to criticize her for being very focused on her niche, as someone who has collected and built a lot of characters, that's really more of a plus point for me. She has a clear purpose and excels at that purpose, and as a result, I use her regularly and enjoy her gameplay a lot. She may have been an accident, but I can't imagine playing without her as an option now. Now that her rerun banner has dropped, I pulled for her first Constellation and got it. Her C1 simply makes it so that you can use her skill twice. I haven't played with this much yet, but it should make her even more flexible, provide even more damage to my cryo DPS characters, and also help with her energy needs. If you're considering pulling for Shenhe, first make sure you've got a cryo DPS character built who would benefit from her buffs, or at least make sure you're planning to build one soon. Without one of these characters in your account, she doesn't have as much use. If you do, she's definitely worth it.